Hey, Magnus here, and if you're new to this channel, I like to talk about cameras specifically for video and anything having to do with that. So if you're new, welcome, hit that subscribe button, and enjoy what I've got to produce. Now in today's episode, I want to talk about Canon, and specifically what's their holdup with 4K. Now Canon revolutionized the DSLR video industry with their 5D Mark II, but what have they done since then? Enjoy this little piece and let me know what you guys think. Here we go. In 2008, Canon started a revolution. The 5D Mark II was a big step in putting cinema quality video into a prosumer's hands, opening up the door for amazing filmmakers to take their cinema quality one step further. Since then, many still look to Canon as a camera company that will not only deliver outstanding pictures from the DSLR lineup, but also deliver in video that can compete with the best cinema cameras out there today. However, as we look into today's landscape of cameras, there are a number of competitors that have entered the market offering similar features for video when compared to Canon cameras. But what has drawn so many to look at different options? Why have consumers looking to up their filmmaking game look to Panasonic or Sony for their filming needs? What exactly has happened that caused this? Let's go back to 2012, a big year for Canon. Canon had announced that the 5D Mark II would be followed up by the 5D Mark III. This camera would have many improved features over the 5D Mark II, though video improvements showed nothing to take note of. It seemed that this camera was more of an evolution rather than a revolution like the Mark II was. However, it was still a very capable video camera. Canon had a video surprise in store later that year. In April 2012, Canon announced the EOS 1DC camera, which was a DSLR made in the Cinema EOS range. So essentially, it was a very capable DSLR that introduced exciting features for video. One of those features was that it was the world's first 4K resolution DSLR camera. Yep, Canon holds that title. What? So even though once again Canon seemed to start another video revolution, there was a couple of caveats one had to get through before one could recognize this camera as a camera that they could use for 4K recording. First, though the sensor was full frame, the camera used an APS-H size portion of the sensor to record its 4K. So basically, it was not true full frame 4K video, though it could record full frame at 1080p. The 4K was limited to 24 or 25p depending whether it's NTSC or PAL, so no 30 or 60 frames per second for higher resolution, which is understandable for the time. And finally, the last but probably one of the biggest hurdles, the codec used was the dreaded MJPEG codec, which meant incredibly huge file sizes for its 4K video. It wasn't all bad though. The very fact that it offered 4K was an amazing feat, and the ability to record in Canon C-Log made it a really capable 4K camera for its time. However, there's another strong negative I didn't mention: the original price at release. The US retail price for the body only was about $15,000. This camera also lacked waveforms, focus peaking, zebra lines, etc., but still had a price point of many capable cinema cameras that offer those features. Basically, there was no point in purchasing this camera. And let's not get into the huge price point of CF cards at the time just to be able to record decent 4K content. All in all, Canon was first, so regardless, it only meant that the future would eventually be bright for 4K, especially since Canon was first to market. All in all, however, the camera didn't sell well, and Canon had to make some huge price cuts to this camera just to sell it at all. Canon had several price drops to this camera, such as 2015's $4,000 price drop from $12,000 to about $8,000. Then another price drop in December 2016 from $8,000 to about $5,000. The camera, in my opinion, was priced way too high for it to seem feasible. Right now, you could find it used for about less than $4,000 on Amazon. Naturally, being first to market meant that competition would be out there wanting to match the 4K capabilities of this camera to steal market share. Though many competitors would jump to take Canon's thunder, the camera that rose beyond the rest was definitely the Panasonic GH4. The GH4 to this day is considered one of the best 4K capable cameras on the market. Sure, it wasn't full frame, but this camera delivered on the promise of affordable 4K cameras. The industry was abuzz in 2014, and many were turning to Panasonic as an option for 4K. The Sony A7 series was also not far behind. Announced in late 2013 and early 2014, the A7 series were another set of 4K capable cameras, though no internal 4K recording, but offered the benefit of the full frame for 4K recording. Canon was facing some stiff competition. But what did Canon have to release in 2014? Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the 7D Mark II, an APS-C camera body that shoots 1080p at 60 frames per second. Yay? It seemed that Canon didn't get the 4K memo about the revolution they started. Perhaps they still wanted to support the 1DC with its expensive price point? Come on, Canon, your competition is out there making money off of features that you just decided to leave out. Make no mistake, the 7D Mark II is still a very capable camera delivering on impressive image quality. But why was Canon holding back? In late 2014, you also had another large camera announcement. Samsung finally stepped up their camera game and announced the impressive NX1, a camera capable of not only amazing 28 megapixel stills at a blazing 15 frames per second, but also 4K video up to 24 frames per second, UHD video at 30 frames per second, and a codec that let you record footage to a slower card thanks to the H.265 compression, all at a price point for the body of just $1,500. With all these announcements, Canon just seemed to have tunnel vision. They had their camera lineup planned out and they knew what they wanted. 2015 was a year that saw releases of the amazing 5DS and the 5DSR, two very high megapixel count cameras that were amazing, though video shooters were still asking, where's the 4K? Now there were other camera releases this year for Canon, including the M3 amongst others, but the expectation of 4K in more budget cameras was not expected, so it was never a surprise. While other camera manufacturers were delivering 4K like it was not an issue, such as Sony's A7S II and A7R II, Canon had one more trick up their sleeve. In February 2016, Canon would finally unveil their next 4K DSLR. 4 years after their first 4K DSLR, you now have the 1DX Mark II. Surely this camera will be amazing and destroy the competition in terms of 4K, right? No. This camera had improvements such as the ability to deliver 4K video at up to 60 frames per second, but also full HD video at 120 frames per second with Canon's amazing dual pixel autofocus capability. Though these features were great, there was still a catch. The dreaded MJPEG codec was once again used for the 4K video. Why? The competition had already released excellently compressed video in 4K with amazing quality, yet Canon still stuck with an ancient 4K codec that made it unusable. In 2012, it was understandable, but in 2016, it didn't make much sense. Also, the $6,000 price point didn't help matters much more anyway. The feeling was that Canon wanted to protect their EOS cinema line, and 4K in a DSLR was more of an afterthought to them rather than an essential feature. And of course, zebra lines, focus peaking, and waveforms did not exist in this camera. neither did Canon's C-Log. But then Canon fans began to think, surely a true successor to the 5D camera would come out with 4K, right? The 5D Mark II revolutionized video. Maybe the 5D Mark IV would include 4K with a reasonable codec, right? It's got to happen. So the announcement finally happened. In August 2016, the 5D Mark IV was announced with 4K. Finally! Amazing, right? But the 4K would be recorded in MJPEG. Again, at a whopping 500 megabits per second for 30 frames per second video. Not only that, but the 4K video would be at a whopping 1.74 times crop from the full frame. Amazing? At this point, there was no turning back. Canon thought that users would fall in love with the camera. But those that shot video with Canon DSLRs were completely disgusted and disappointed with that announcement. Why would they use a codec that was created in the 90s for a modern DSLR in 2016? Though Canon never admitted it, it seemed evident that Canon did not want to disrupt their cinema line. This camera is clearly aimed at photographers, and those in the industry for video production with DSLR and mirrorless cameras were not happy. Many videos were online at that point and made why I switched from Canon to so-and-so a hot topic. While trying to protect their camera line, it seemed that Canon was losing a large number of loyalists to competitors thanks to their resistance to a camera capable of delivering the desire on a full-frame 4K with a workable codec. Surely Canon had to realize how upset everyone was, right? They had to follow up with a good camera with 4K. Though there were releases of the M5 and the 77D with 1080p, it seemed that the follow-up to the excellent 6D would have to be the camera with the chance for Canon to right the wrongs of the missing 4K in its 5D and make it an amazing camera. The 6T Mark II was announced in June 2017 with improvements for video. What were the improvements? Dual pixel autofocus, a flip screen to make filming yourself easier, and 1080p at 60 frames per second.
Really? Really? No 4K? Like, come on, like, people want that.
At this point, you almost have to believe Canon is trolling their fan base. What is the deal? The Panasonic GH5 was announced and released for $2,000 and offered 10-bit 422 UHD video with an H.264 compression at 30 frames per second and 8-bit 420 internal UHD video at 60 frames per second. Not only that, but you can also purchase Vlog and record 10-bit 422 at 60 frames per second using an external recorder. Did Canon care? Nope. Why not? No other camera bodies would feature 4K recording for Canon until the announcement of the M50 in 2018. And although they finally gave you a reasonable compression to the 4K video, Canon left out the ability to use their amazing dual pixel autofocus. So finally the question is why? What sense does this make? Well, I have a theory. Though many others have mentioned that Canon wants to protect their cinema line, I would actually want to go one step further. The truth is, those interested in a camera body with 4K capabilities are probably not going to purchase their cinema line. 4K is a feature that keeps all eyes on Canon. 4K has pretty much become standard amongst all other camera body manufacturers. Even cell phones make it easy to record in 4K. But now we have reached the point of watching Canon with each camera release. Everyone is paying attention. When Canon announced the M50, the fact that it could record 4K became a big deal to everyone reporting on it. Had this been any other camera manufacturer, it would have been an afterthought. Take this statement as just a theory, but perhaps Canon has us right where they want us. And when they finally announce their first full-frame H.264 capable 4K camera with no crop, they might just be the talk of the town. So there you have it. Canon just might be setting us all up for the next unveiling. Leave your comments down below if you like this, and hit that like as always. And thank you for watching and subscribing. And as always, you can make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys later.